Welcome to Inspiration and Transformation from the Banks of the Ganga with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati, an American sannyasi living at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram in Rishikesh, India. Sadhvi is president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to women and children. Sadhvi is also Secretary General of the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival. Join the musings of an American sannyasi as Sadhvi shares the wisdom and teachings of her guru, His Holiness Pujya Swami Chidanand Saraswatiji.
Welcome, everyone, to Inspiration and Transformation from the holy banks of the sacred Ganga River in the land of Rishikesh, India. A complex question. She's given a history, all of the details of which are not relevant to everyone, but basically 4 years ago her brother died. She didn't cry at all, she said. And she was brought here by a friend to Rishikesh, but she doesn't even have any memory of how she got here. And over the last 4 years, she hasn't done any puja, any prayers to God, any experience, any connection with God, any prayers, any mandir, anything like that. And her memory, she's lost it. So हम इसके बाद भी बात करेंगे. I think there's some things to work out separately as well. But it is important for all is all of the different aspects of our mind, of our brain, they impact each other. Even things that you don't necessarily think are related. And one of the greatest impacts upon our brain/mind is trauma. And so when we lose a loved one, particularly if it's unexpected, she looks relatively young. I imagine her brother was also relatively young. So there will have been some sort of traumatic experience in that. Several things happen. When we don't actually acknowledge emotions that are there in that moment, when we push things away, they actually end up festering within us. Now, this is very different from the emotions of the past that end up just being sort of a rehearsed script. So I'm not talking about going back and reliving all of the emotions of things that hurt you 50 years ago or 20 years ago in your childhood. But as things happen in our lives, and we don't address them, it causes an impact. And that's why, for example, when things happen in childhood that we don't address, we end up having to address them as adults, because at some point you have to address it. It's a festering wound inside. The dilemma with most of the Western models of psychology is they don't have us just address it once. They tend to take the rest of our lives and stick it in constantly rehashing and rehashing and rehashing and rehashing, where spirituality is all about acknowledge, see, heal, let go, and move on. But when things happen in our adult life that are traumatic, and we don't create any space for us to experience them, they're going to have impacts in us, the same way as they did when we were children if we didn't experience them or allow ourselves to experience them. And so, as she mentioned, she didn't cry. There was a level of aversion to, pushing away of, denial of an aspect of the self, a pain within the self, that is very difficult to do. Even if you tell yourself, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to cry, I'm going to be strong, maybe for his kids, maybe for our mother, nonetheless you cry. The amount of energy and willpower and mental resolve that is required to not cry when your brother dies is so much that it doesn't surprise me that there have been both spiritual ramifications, as in, I no longer believe in God, I no longer love God, I don't pray to God anymore. Because of course, if there were God, how could this have happened? But also that I have been pushed away from the functioning of my own brain, mind, and my own heart. My heart that feels for God, that loves God, I've pushed that away. Because how can I love God and not actually feel inside what has happened about my brother? And so I think that on some very basic level, there's kind of a death grip over the mind that she has exerted to keep herself from feeling that pain, that is having this ripple effect of memory loss and confusion. We do also, fortunately, have some beautiful doctors in the audience who afterwards we will have you meet just to make sure that there's not actually something in the brain. They'll be able to help talk to you about that. But my suggestion on a spiritual level would be, don't push things away. Give yourself the time and space to feel that. Sit on the banks of Ganga and cry. Don't force yourself to cry, but sit on the banks of Ganga and allow to happen whatever is natural to happen. Allow the brain, the mind, the thoughts to relax into that freedom that doesn't have this death grip of don't think that, don't feel that, don't go there. Allow a spaciousness to come back to your mind. There are a lot of areas of your mind right now that are off limits. Bring them back on limits. So if I say to you all here right now, here we are enjoying ourselves in satsang, but if I say you can't leave, or even worse, if I take all of you on this half of the room and I say you've got to get onto this half of the room, nobody can go. Now we're already full on both halves of the room, but if I squeeze all of you onto this half, so you're super squeezed together, and I say no one can go there, and no one can leave, in a very short period of time, we're going to start to see all kinds of mental distress. Beautiful, spiritual people, you've come together in satsang. Peaceful, loving people, but simply simply this aspect of being essentially jailed. What makes it jail? I've decided you're not free. This room is heaven as long as you're free. The minute I say you're no longer free, heaven becomes hell. And the same thing happens in our minds. It's not actually about the thought itself. It's about that control that I am trying to exert over it with keeping so much of it off limits. And this is why, by the way, on spiritual paths, when we talk about being free of things like lust and greed and anger and jealousy and whatnot, we're always really clear to emphasize it's not about repressing them. It's not about suppressing. It's not about denying. It's actually about becoming free of them through an awareness of the truth of the self in such a way that there no longer is something to covet. There no longer is an us versus them. There no longer is a need for competition, because I realize I'm not the pawn in the game. I'm the one who's agreed to play it. And so whether I make checkmate or you checkmate me or I'm the king or it's irrelevant. When I identify as the piece on the board, it's very relevant. Who wins, who loses, who's ahead. But when I identify as the one who, in all enjoyment, agreed to play this game, then all of that attachment to the separation, the competition, the gotta get ahead, gotta be, it dissipates. Right? I mean, raise your hand if you've ever played a game with a friend. A board game, a card game, and anything, right? Most people, I imagine. Now, even the most sincere players, you remember, you're not the piece. You know, I remember when we were young, we would play Monopoly, and there were all the different things that you got to be, right? There was a hat, and there was a thimble, and there were all sorts of different things that you got, and different properties you could buy, and places you could buy, and it was fun. But nobody actually lost themselves over it. You never actually screamed and yelled and had tantrums. You understood, I'm the player of this game. I'm not the actual piece that's going around the board. And so all of that, the anger, the ego, the attachment, the competition, the greed, all of that comes, the jealousy, because we identify as the pieces on the board rather than as the soul that consciously agreed to come here on earth in this form and to be part of this divine play, this divine Leela. And so being free of those emotions, experiences, vasanas, whatever we refer to them as, isn't about repression and suppression and denial. It's about opening to the truth of who you are, and those things automatically dissipate. Whether it's greed or it's lust or it's competition, it's all rooted in this sense of I'm an object, you're an object. And either you're going to be an object to give me something I want, some sensory pleasure or some property or some money or some prestige or some job, or you are an object I need to fight with You're a hurdle. You're my competition. But it's all rooted in this ignorance of separation. And that's where the light, the truth of oneness comes and dispels that. But what you see is what happens in the mind, in the brain, when we literally try to squeeze it in a death grip of, you can't think about this, you can't feel that, you can't go there. It turns what could be heaven in our minds into hell in our minds. Like heaven in this room is we're free, into hell if suddenly you're all stuck over here and no one can go there, no one can go there, no one can go out. And this is where the ultimate goal is freedom. But I have to be open to that. And so be careful in your paths in your mind as aspects come up that maybe aren't what you would wish to be there. Instead of trying to push them away, can you expand the nature of the self? I'll conclude with this demo on that, which is my favorite demo about this. So this is a glass of water. If I take a rock, or several rocks, and I throw them in this glass of water, what's going to happen? Yeah, water's going to come out. It's going to splash all over. It'll be a total mess. This glass of water symbolizes most of our experience of ourself. The rocks symbolize the things in the world that happen to us that we would like not to happen, that are causing our experience of self to splash all over the place and make a complete mess in our lives. And so we spend most of our lives trying to fight off, push away these rocks. Don't think about that. Don't do this. Don't be with these people. That's the don't talk to me because I'm very peaceful and I don't want you to disturb my peace. Right? Don't come too close. Don't come home. Just leave me alone because I'm very peaceful. And if you start talking to me, I'm going to lose my peace. So that's pushing away these rocks. But it doesn't work very well. And it severely restricts the freedom of our lives. If instead of that, you took those rocks and you dumped them into a full bathtub, what would happen? Yeah, a little bit, depending on the size of your bathtub and the size of the rocks. Anywhere between nothing and little ripples. Now if you took them and you dropped them in the ocean, nothing at all. So the teaching is not about push the rocks away, but become the ocean. Because that is who you are. So instead of identifying as the glass, identify as the ocean. The rocks will come. Things will come in life. Things will happen. Identify as the ocean. So there's enough space for there to be a thought about this, an experience of that, a ripple of a sanskara of that, an old impression of this, an old ego of that. But it doesn't disturb the ocean. It coexists. It's not splashing me all over the place in a mess. I've become spacious enough, expanded enough, that there's room for it all. And that's what the goal is.
You're listening to OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday 2 p.m. Eastern as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Hi, this is Christina Ricci with RAIN. Every 2 minutes, another American is sexually assaulted. If you or someone you know has been sexually assaulted, you are not alone. Help is just a call or click away through the National Sexual Assault Hotline. Please call 1-800-656-HOPE, that's HOPE, or visit RAIN.org, that's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by RAIN and this station.
Welcome back to Inspiration and Transformation. I'm so glad to have you all back here with me. Let's drop into it in the way of that which can be a truth for all of us, rather than just a plot summary of aspects of where this body moved and came. So, the important part to me is that it actually was an experience of grace. A journey is something that our physical bodies take. So we are on a journey of life. Body keeps changing, we physically are moving. Internally, what happens is an opening and an expanding and an awakening. Because a journey implies you're going somewhere other than where you are. And yes, I did physically. I came from California to India. So there was a journey that through Singapore Airlines I was able to take. So Singapore Airlines gets the credit for the physical aspect of the journey from California to India. But the actual opening, the actual experience, that only grace gets credit for. It's a story of grace. And the reason that I say that is, and this is very important to me, and it's one of the only reasons that I actually share my story, aside from just the beauty of the journey, is that most of us think that there's some prerequisite that we have to have in order to be good enough for grace to shine in our lives. That somehow we have to be pure or better beings, worthier beings for grace. And my experience, my life, what I've experienced with grace makes me know that grace absolutely does not discriminate. Grace doesn't care whether you're rich or you're poor, where you're from in the world, what you've done, what you've experienced. Grace doesn't care if you got up to meditate this morning or you hit the snooze button. Really. A lot of us have this sense of somehow I'm not worthy enough of grace in my life. I still have ego, I have jealousy, I have fear, I have lust, I have greed. I'm not worthy of grace. And I came here as a 25-year-old student, not a student of spirituality, a student of psychology, not a student who knew even that this was something to look for. And that's so important because grace gave me this experience, this awareness, despite the fact that I wasn't looking for it, that I hadn't overcome or even had any awareness that I should overcome things like lust and greed and jealousy and ego and anger. I mean, I had never met anybody who had ever said to me, you need to overcome these things. It wasn't even part of my awareness that one needed to work in order to be pure for grace. And nonetheless, there was grace. And that's why we call it grace. If you get something that you've done something for, well, that's more like reimbursement. Or a paycheck, or something you've earned, or you're entitled to it. It's not grace then. When you get that which in your mind you don't deserve, that's grace. So there's no question about being worthy of grace, being good enough of grace. Grace is there for all of us. And for me, it was an experience of standing on the banks of Ganga. At 25, knowing nothing about Ganga as the divine, knowing nothing, and being handed an experience of grace, of truth, that transformed me, that just blew me open, that pulled back all of the layers at once. And it was exquisite and extraordinary and transformative, and that was it, in terms of knowing for me that I needed to be here. Knowing that this was where I needed to stay. And so I did. But it has continued to be a story of grace. It wasn't just grace in that moment. It's grace of being given the opportunity to serve. Because that's what the highest expression of our spiritual awakening is service. Now, of course, it begins as, I get to do something. And I certainly remember the beginning of going to Puja Swamiji and saying, is there anything I can do? And him giving me little sevas, and it grew and it grew. But slowly, by grace, what happens is, it's not about you doing seva. It's not about you as the one doing, because that's still in separation. It's just about that which is given. So in the same way that apple trees give apples, and rivers give water, and flowers give fragrance, and the sun gives light and warmth, and everything in nature just gives through its isness. The apple tree isn't giving us apples. The apple tree is just being an apple tree. The river isn't giving us water. It's just being a river. And that grace of the opportunity to be of service, it's not, oh, you are the chosen one who gets to serve the others. It's, here are ways through which, if you do them with a pure heart and a pure mind that you keep working with, to remove the doership, that it's not me who's doing. The river's not thinking, oh, I'm the one bringing water. The apple tree's not thinking, oh, I'm the one providing apples. Apples are just happening. Water is just happening. Fragrance is just happening. And that extraordinary grace of being able to happen. So it's not about giving or doing. It's about a happening through which there is service. But not me as the server, somehow different from the others. But how can each of us, in our own true experience and expression of ourselves, of our isness, be those tools? And so it's been an incredible experience of grace. And yeah, I feel very, very blessed. And if my story teaches anything, it teaches that it can happen to anyone. That it's not about all the prerequisites that you need for grace or for awakening or for any of that. Just an openness to grace. And a willingness to get out of the way all of that which is occupying space that you'd rather be filled with grace. Getting that thinking mind, as we were talking about in the beginning, out. And that for me happened also by grace very, very easily and very, very soon. I realized very early on, I don't know anything. Everything I've ever been taught is wrong. Not because people were purposely trying to lead me in the wrong direction. They really believed that it was true. But nonetheless, my experience in this moment is belying everything I was previously taught. And so it became very quickly this blank slate of, I don't know anything. Fill me. And the more space there is, physics tells us the universe hates a vacuum, right? Same thing spiritually. Create enough space in you. From the story, from the drama, from the identity, from the attachments, from the aversions, from the preferences, from the judgments, from all of that. And into that space, grace flows.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth Radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with Inspiration and Transformation. She said, how does one stay true to oneself when there's so much outside noise trying to pull you off of your truth? Well, the first piece is to even know what my truth is. Most of us don't even know that. For most of us, our path in life, our truth in life, tends to be formed from one of two things. Either I do exactly what I was told to do, whether it was by my parents and family or whether it was by my culture and society. Get a good job, make a lot of money, build your white picket fence, climb that career ladder. Or I do the exact opposite of what they told me to do, in the illusion that somehow that makes me free. But I'm actually just as stuck in both situations, because neither situation is based on actually my truth. Both of them are based on someone else's truth. Either I'm doing what they say, or I'm doing the exact opposite of what they say. Not because the opposite is my truth, but because they've said night, I've said day, that makes me feel free. Then, of course, they say day, I say night. And I keep feeling free until I realize they're playing a trick on me. It's like one of those old parenting, babysitting techniques for little kids where you say, don't eat your peas. And they, when you're not looking, what do? Eat all the peas. But if you say, eat your peas, when you're not looking, what do? They take the peas, they throw them on the floor. So in either case, we are just childishly walking someone else's truth. So the first piece is to know what even is my truth. Not in reaction to society. Not in you've said it so I won't do it. But really, what's my truth? And then to be sure to stay anchored in it. Because there is a lot of noise. And it's more than noise, it's actually also a physical, energetic pull. And so we have to stay grounded. And this is where your spiritual practice is so important. Every morning you get up, you meditate. Even if it's 5 minutes, 7 minutes. Because whether you actually experience enlightenment or not in those 5 minutes, you've connected with yourself. You've at least grounded and anchored in you. And then again, at the end of the day, you re-anchor, you re-ground. One of the ways that I like to think about it, because we do have to play roles in the world. And the roles may not necessarily be our deepest truth of consciousness, right? I mean, you may be a school teacher, for example, and you may have to be a disciplinarian at times, whereas in your heart you're just loving, 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 loving. But there may be times when you have to get a stern voice. You may be the CEO of a company or the president of a company, and even if in your heart there's nothing but love for all of your employees, nonetheless, there may be moments where you have to be stern and strict and even kind of bring on a drama of anger to make things happen. So there are roles that we play. And that's okay. As long as we don't forget that they aren't who we are. And so one way to think about it is in the morning, in your morning meditation, after you meditate, have a little ritual and literally feel like you are putting on your role, like zip it on. I'm going out into the world and here's the role I play. And then do it. Do it fully. Do it sincerely. Then at the end of the day, you come back. And whether it's in a physical shower that you have when you get home, whether it's in a spiritual shower through your meditation, either way. But literally take it off. And that'll enable you even moving through the world, playing different roles, to stay grounded to your truth. However, that doesn't mean that you should play roles that are in direct conflict with your truth. And this is something that each of us has to negotiate for ourselves. If I know that my highest truth is soul, spirit, love, expansive consciousness, well, I may zip up the role of CEO or president or school teacher or whatever it may be. But I'm not going to zip up a role that is in contrast to what path I know I'm supposed to walk. And this is where, when we speak about universal dharma and then individual dharma. So we've got universal dharma. Is that dharma, that path, that way that we all are supposed to follow. Of waking up, of knowing the truth of who we are, of living with love and truth and oneness. But then we've got our individual dharma. And that varies. And it may even vary during different times of your life. But that's where it's really important to know within you. To anchor yourself in your truth of what's my truth here. And not to just allow the noise of society to tell you, here's how you're supposed to live. Because sadly, the louder it is doesn't mean the truer it is. And this is where you find that ability to be noiseless amidst the noise. Right? Meditation is not about escaping from the noise. It's not about running away from the world. But it's about finding that noiselessness amidst the noise. And then having the courage to walk it, though. Because that's also really important. A lot of us give in to the noise because we're afraid. What if people laugh? What if I fail? What if I walk my truth and I fail? And that's where courage is so important. And that's where my favorite piece of trivia about courage is so important, which is that the word courage, literally the etymology of the word courage, comes from the same root of the word cur, which means heart. And so courage actually requires an open heart. And it requires meeting the world with an open heart. And so find that. Yeah.
This is OTR-FM, part of the IOM radio network.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Do you have time to read that inspiring book or that blog post you've been meaning to get to? In your busy world, how do you improve yourself and keep your life going? I'm Lisa Kay, and my Between Heaven and Earth radio show can transform your life just by listening. Be uplifted with inspiring topics, positive stories, and ideas that really work. Between Heaven and Earth radio is conscious living for your soul, every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Like Baldwin with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. I grew up loving circuses and other traveling animal shows, but it never occurred to me what life might be like for the animals. Training wild animals to do things they don't understand takes force. Routine discipline with a hook or whip with the heel of a boot shows the animal exactly who's the boss. Don't patronize animal acts. Please contact People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
757-622-PETA.
Welcome back. This is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati with inspiration and transformation. Impatience comes from the belief that somehow there is something wrong with the present moment. That's why I'm impatient. Something is wrong in this moment that in another moment is going to be right. Whether I'm impatient with others because they're not getting it right or doing it right, or whether I'm simply impatient in general. Things should happen faster and better. What I want should happen faster and more. Either way, they're both rooted in the same myth that there is something wrong with the present moment. And the only way to be patient is to realize the perfection of the present moment. That doesn't mean that we may want the next moment to be different. Perfection in the present moment doesn't mean laziness or complacency or agreeing to the status quo. It simply means in this moment, in this breath, in this place, everything's exactly as it should be. And in the next moment, I'm gonna work, beginning perhaps with an intention in this moment, to bring about a change. Should I believe that future moments can be even more perfect than the present moment? Perfect in a different way than the present moment? But as long as this moment is here, this is exactly the moment that you are supposed to have right now. So impatience assumes as its base that there is something wrong with this moment, that something should be better about this moment, and that it better happen fast. So it's also living in the future. And the dilemma of that is you miss the present. And the other aspect of impatience is we think it's about something specific. So for example, I'm really impatient to finish high school so that I can go off to college. I'm really impatient to finish college so I can get into graduate school. I'm really impatient to finish graduate school so that I can finally have my career. I'm really impatient to rise in my career so that I can do even more. I mean, everything becomes something else. But in each moment, we think it's just one thing. If at any moment you said, what's wrong with the present moment? We'd give you one main thing. I'm impatient for this or about that. But the dilemma is it's never that. It's always one after the other, after the other, after the other. And that actually just becomes the nature of who we are. And then you keep missing your present moments. Every one of them. Because you're always somewhere in the future. Because that becomes what in Indian spiritual tradition we call a sanskara. In Western science we talk about as a neural pattern or a neural network. Of how literally our brain moves. And when we have impatience, it's constantly like, yeah, okay. Wait, faster. When is this going to change? Hurry up. That needs to happen. Whether it's someone else, whether it's me, whether it's the universe. And so I'm never here. I'm always in the future and it's not coming fast enough. If you bring yourself back to your breath, the breath is a fantastic tool. Because it's right here, right now. You can't breathe 5 minutes ago's breath. You can't breathe tomorrow's breath. The only breath you can have is this one. And so the more awareness of the breath you can be rooted in, the more in the present you are. And that's doable with eyes open, walking through the world, sitting in a board meeting, driving your car. You don't have to be eyes closed, sitting in, lotus position in your temple meditating. You can be aware of the breath, grounded in the breath, whatever else you're doing. But it always brings you straight into the present moment. And so the minute you find the mind becoming impatient, bring it to the breath. And give yourself some mantra. If you've got a mantra already, use that. If not, if there's something that appeals deeply to you, use that. Otherwise, it can literally just be something like, the present moment is full. The present moment is perfect. Or even just something like, the present moment is all there is. Find something that resonates with you, that when you say it, there's an internal sense of, something you can literally exhale into. And just allow that to resonate through your awareness. And because it's a habit and a pattern, you can unlearn it. Impatience is not a very deeply rooted sense of self. It's just a personality habit and trait that we adopt and then we keep strengthening. You can unlearn it. Puja Swamiji always says, if you're impatient, you become a patient. Literally, it makes you sick. So we learn patience so we don't have to be a patient. This brings to a close this hour of inspiration and transformation. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad to be together with you all each week. And I look forward to being together again next Thursday, same time, on OMTimes Radio.